Imagine being tied up and slowly lowered into a giant pot of boiling liquid. Not once, but over and over again, until your skin peels, your body fails, and you finally stop screaming. It sounds like something from a horror film, but this actually happened, and not just once. In the past, boiling someone alive was considered a legal punishment in some parts of the world. It was used to make a statement and to scare everyone watching. So who were the people sentenced to die this way? And what kind of crimes led to such extreme punishment? In this video, we uncover the chilling stories behind one of the most terrifying execution methods in history. Boiling someone alive might sound like a wild rumor, but it was very real. In medieval and early modern times, some countries used boiling as an official form of execution. It wasn't common, but when it happened, it made a strong impression. Unlike hanging or beheading, which could be quick, boiling was slow, painful, and public. Boiling was often used for crimes that were seen as especially sneaky or dangerous, like poisoning. People feared poison because it could kill silently and without warning. That fear led kings and judges to demand punishments that matched the horror of the crime. In England, Germany, France, and even parts of Asia, large pots were filled with oil, water, or even lead. The liquid was heated over fire, and the accused was lowered in with ropes or chains. Sometimes they were dropped in all at once. Other times, they were lowered slowly, a terrifying process meant to cause as much suffering as possible. This wasn't just about punishment, it was about power. Boiling sent a message: betray the public's trust, and your end will be worse than your crime. One of the most well-known cases of boiling as execution happened in England in 1532. The man's name was Richard Roose, and he was just a cook. Roose worked in the household of Bishop John Fisher, a well-known figure in King Henry VIII's court. One day, Roose added something to a pot of porridge, something deadly. 2 people died, and others became seriously ill. Roose claimed it was an accident. He said he had only added a laxative as a joke, but King Henry VIII didn't laugh. Poisoning was taken very seriously, especially when aimed at someone close to the church or the crown. At the time, poisoning wasn't considered treason, but Henry changed that overnight. He passed a new law that made poisoning a form of treason, and he made boiling alive the punishment. Roose's execution was public. At Smithfield in London, a large cauldron of boiling water was prepared. He was tied up and lowered in, not all at once, but in stages. He screamed as his skin burned. Witnesses said he was pulled up and dropped back in multiple times. The whole thing lasted over 2 hours. The message was clear: poison the people, and this is what happens to you. Across the world in Japan, another boiling execution became legendary, though this one mixes history with myth. His name was Ishikawa Goemon. Some saw him as a thief, others as a folk hero, like a Japanese Robin Hood. He was said to have stolen from the rich to help the poor, but Goemon made a fatal mistake. He tried to assassinate one of the most powerful men in Japan, Toyotomi Hideyoshi. He failed. He was captured, along with his young son. The punishment was brutal and unforgettable. In 1594, in front of a crowd, Goemon and his son were sentenced to death by boiling. A giant iron cauldron was filled with boiling oil. Both father and child were lowered in together. Some stories say that Goemon held his son above the oil, trying to protect him from the heat, until he couldn't anymore. Eventually, both died in terrible pain. Historians believe the story may have been exaggerated or romanticized over time, but Goemon's execution became part of Japanese culture. His name appears in plays, books, and even video games. He's remembered as a symbol of rebellion, tragedy, and bravery in the face of a horrifying death. Even if the full truth is unclear, one thing is certain: being boiled alive was so extreme, so inhuman, that the story never left people's memories. It became a warning and a legend. Boiling alive wasn't limited to just England or Japan. Though rare, it appeared in other parts of Europe. And each time, it was used to make a brutal statement. In Germany during the 14th and 15th centuries, boiling was sometimes used for people who forged coins. Counterfeiting money wasn't just theft. It was seen as attacking the king's authority. And so, those caught were punished in the most public and painful way. In France and the Netherlands, similar punishments were used for poisoners and traitors. In some cases, executioners used oil instead of water, which burned even hotter and caused more damage. There are also records of boiling being used in Scotland and even colonial territories. In Brazil during the Portuguese colonial period, enslaved people who tried to rebel were sometimes punished with boiling or scalding. One of the most horrifying examples of how cruelly power was enforced. But even in places where boiling wasn't a common punishment, the idea of it created fear. Just hearing about it was enough to scare people into obedience. These examples show that boiling wasn't just about one crime or one country. It was about fear and control. It was meant to be unforgettable, both for the person dying and for everyone watching. Boiling someone alive wasn't just a punishment, it was a performance, a message. And every part of it was designed to shock people into silence. Why boiling? In many cases, the choice wasn't random. It was symbolic. Poisoning, for example, was seen as sneaky and invisible, a crime done in secret. So the punishment had to be the opposite: loud, slow, messy, and public. Boiling made sure everyone saw what happened when someone betrayed trust or broke the rules in the worst way. It also gave the authorities a chance to show their power. Public executions were not just about removing a criminal. They were about reminding everyone who was in charge. When crowds gathered to watch, they weren't just there for justice. They were being warned. This could be you. The pain was part of the lesson. So was the screaming, the smell, the horror. Even the way victims were sometimes lowered into the pot little by little. It wasn't by accident. It was done to stretch the fear as long as possible. In a time without TV, social media, or newspapers, this was how fear spread. Through stories, through memory, through nightmares. Boiling alive wasn't just punishment. It was propaganda. Over time, even the most brutal systems begin to change. And so did boiling. In England, the law that allowed boiling alive was short-lived. It was introduced by Henry VIII in 1531 and officially removed just 16 years later in 1547 under the rule of his son, Edward VI. Even the next generation found it too extreme. Elsewhere, the punishment faded out slowly. By the 1700s, most European countries had stopped using boiling as execution. Public attitudes were shifting. The Enlightenment had sparked new ideas about justice, reason, and human rights. People began asking if extreme pain really made society better, or just more afraid. But the memory of boiling never fully disappeared. In some modern cases, reports have surfaced of boiling being used by extremist groups or oppressive regimes. It still appears in stories, legends, films, and horror fiction. The method itself may be gone, but the fear it caused remains powerful. Boiling didn't just punish the body. It left a mark on history. And that's why, even now, centuries later, we still talk about it. And the terrible things people once believed were justice. You might wonder, why talk about something so awful today? What does a punishment like boiling have to do with us now? Because it reminds us how much justice has changed, and how far we still have to go. There was a time when slow, painful death was seen as normal, even necessary. People thought the more someone suffered, the more justice was served. But now, we know that cruelty doesn't equal fairness. And we ask different questions. Is this punishment fair? Is it humane? Does it protect people? Or just scare them? Looking back at boiling executions shows us how power can be abused when there are no limits. It shows how fear can shape laws, and how people can become so focused on revenge they forget about mercy. It also forces us to look at today. Are there places where justice is still ruled by fear instead of fairness? Are there punishments happening now that future generations will look back on with horror? Studying the darkest parts of history isn't about enjoying the pain. It's about learning from it. And boiling is one of those stories we shouldn't forget, because it shows what happens when pain becomes law. The idea of boiling someone alive sounds impossible today, but it was once seen as justice. From a cook in England to a rebel in Japan, these stories weren't just about punishment. They were about fear, control, and the power of the state to decide how much a body could suffer. Now, it's our job to remember, to ask, how far is too far? And who decides what justice really means? What do you think? Is there ever a crime so terrible that it deserves this kind of punishment? Or should pain never be part of justice? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more dark and powerful stories from history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us next time.